How does the admission officer view the gap year? It's not very common in China, so students and parents wanted to ask this question. What would be some of the concerns or even red flags raised when a reviewer like you sees gap year?
So it's a great question because gap years are becoming increasingly common for
Right.
US students, particularly coming out of the pandemic. For me, it depends entirely on what a student has done with that year. So if they have done things that are going to contribute to their personal growth or to their community, I'm thrilled to see it. And whereas I know that, for instance, travel contributes to my personal growth and most of ours, right, to see other places in the world, I really want to see something beyond that. If that makes sense.
Right.
I want to see a student that has really worked, and that doesn't necessarily have to be academic work, whether they've taken a job and they've worked full time somewhere that doesn't seem very glamorous, or but they're doing hard work, or they're doing out-facing, customer service. They're in an industry that they might not be in otherwise, or they've done some significant service work. But I want to see that a student has, and maybe taken a class or two, but it's really sort of, is this student, how have they changed as a person and as a learner and a community member in that? Have they used that year to grow as a human and ideally to do something that's contributing elsewhere? Then I think a gap year is wonderful.
Next question is about a recent news. What are your opinions towards the ruling of the affirmative action and its potential impact on the college admission process?
I didn't agree with the ruling. I was sad to hear it. Two things. I hope that for private colleges, they're going to continue to think about what it means to shape a community and shape a class of learners from diverse backgrounds that enhance each other's learning and experience as humans and as students. In admissions, I always felt like we were building a class, a community of learners. And you build a community by bringing people together with a real range of backgrounds, identities, and experiences, and that creates a pretty outstanding learning environment. And we see this happening across universities in the US, colleges and universities. So I would hope that that trend or that movement continues rather than comes to a halt.
I think despite of ruling the affirmative action, I actually received a lot of emails from like many universities saying that they will continue to be like diverse, to create a diverse environment for all the students.
Exactly. I think universities are being very thoughtful about their statements about what this means, and that they will work very hard internally, I think, and together collectively to learn, think about what they can do going forward.
So next question, how are misconducts or violations reviewed when you see such a record? What information would you want to look for to understand if that's still a student you'd like to consider for admission? And how much would such records affect the applicant's chances?
It's a great question. Depends, right? How glaring that violation is. So there are two things I would say. One is when you're looking at these very, very highly selective colleges, it's difficult because sort of anything that can detract from a student's application, when already those odds are so slim, you don't want that to be there. I think it's really important for young people to know, and I say this as a mother of young people too, and someone who's worked in high schools for a long time as well. It's really important that young people know they can make mistakes, and that does not take away or determine all of their future opportunities. So the great majority of sort of misconduct and violations that I saw as an admission officer were really students making honest mistakes where they did not mean to harm anyone else. If they had an error, they wrote with very earnest remorse about what they learned, and things like plagiarism. We saw, but again with the internet, plagiarism really means something different. It was often a student sort of in that area where there's still, I think, clarity for all of us and what that means. So it's important in terms of how their school writes about that violation and how the student writes about that violation. And also it matters, did it happen the first semester of ninth grade versus the last semester of junior year? If I see a student and I see anything to do with dishonesty, a violation of school rules, or plagiarism late in their junior year, that feels really different to me than a 14 or 15-year-old.
How suitable is it for a student to disclose their experience of depression or emotional vulnerability during their high school years in their application? Will it have a negative influence on their application?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, very timely, right? Because more students are experiencing mental health issues in high school, and or more students are disclosing them. And I'm so glad and seeking help in ways that we don't know if it's more, that we know that it's more, that adolescents are struggling, and certainly since COVID. I think students always need to disclose what they feel they need to disclose, and they really need to be mindful that the people reading that don't know their entirety as a human. One thing I did say to a student once is she had written quite a bit about some significant sort of mental health issues she'd experienced, and was very clearly sort of feeling in a strong place. And whereas I could see her thriving, coping. I saw the whole arc of that experience. You are putting something in an application that a few people only get to read for 20 or 30 minutes. And they are also human beings who care very much about the health and well-being of the students who they're admitting to their school, right? They want to make sure they can support all of these students well, right? We don't want to admit students and then say, we can't offer you what you need to support you. I never want to tell students not to be honest about their experience. If there's a lot disclosed, it can be difficult for admission officers, right? Because there's not a lot of other pieces around it for them to get a bigger picture.
Last question in this part. So what is one common mistake students make in their application that can be easily avoided, in your opinion?
Oh, well, typos. Sometimes I would see a student that has worked so hard, clearly, for so many years, and they're an excellent student, and if there were sort of these obvious grammatical or typos, I didn't want to penalize a student for it, and yet it felt like you should really be taking care of this application. And timeliness, get everything in on time, be following up with your recommendations, make sure that they're in on time. So these are the easy things you can do. But I would say that was the big one for me, is it was always a little bit glaring to me when there was a typo or grammatical error where it felt like of all the documents you want to proofread, this is probably one of them.